By the end of the first part of this texturing tutorial, we'll have built out some simple yet detailed textures to finally breathe some life into the Recon helmet, so let's get started. So in Quixel Mixer, let's go ahead, we'll make a new project here, and so let's just call this Recon helmet, so we know what it is, and we'll make a new mix, and we'll just call it Recon helmet again. I don't know why it's like that. And I'm going to work at a 4K resolution, but just depending on your system, adjust it accordingly. Cool. So first things first, let's go ahead and we'll change the model type from plain to a custom model. And then we'll just go ahead and we'll find that FBX file that we exported from the last tutorial. And so now we've got that into Quixel. Next thing we want to do is we'll edit our texture sets here. And so we can bring in the normal map. So pop that in. We'll bring in our ambient occlusion. And we'll bring in our material ID as well. And once we've done that, that's all set up. And so then if you press the numbers across the top of your keyboard, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, you'll notice that it's changing the view layer that we're seeing, which is handy to see that we've imported things, and we can also see where our masks are for later on. So the first thing I want to do is let's just go ahead and let's add a group, and we'll just call this group colors. And we'll add in a solid layer here. I'll just drag it into our folder. And let's just call this primary. And what we'll do with this is we'll right click on it and we'll say add an ID mask, which will give us a list of our available IDs. So if you just want to press 8 on your keyboard, you can see our IDs just in case you've forgotten. So we want our primary to be bright red. And then we can just give this a color as well. So just in our albedo here, we can just give this a nice reddy sort of color, something, whatever you want, doesn't really matter at the moment. And with this selected, let's go ahead, let's give a value of 50 for our metalness here. And in our roughness, we'll go ahead and we'll give it a value of 30. So these are just going to be like our base layers, and then we'll build everything on top of this. And we can turn off displacement normals and occlusion. We're also just going to enable the emission here, which is going to make everything glow. And you can turn emission off by pressing S. It does say to press E in Quixel, but that doesn't seem to work for me, so I'm using S to toggle that on and off, or you can always just press this button here. So I don't want to actually show the emissive. These will make more sense later. But what we're going to do for the primary is we're going to set it to a value that is just completely red. So just 100% red. And this is not attached to the fact that I've chosen a red color here. We could choose something completely different if you wanted to. It's just a preview material. But I'll explain the mission at the end of the tutorial. So with the primary, let's just go ahead with the layer selected. We'll go Control and D to duplicate it. Let's call this one black, and we'll change our albedo here. So I'm just going to take all the saturation out because we just want this to be more or less pure black, but not quite. And we're going to use a value of 12 here. And we're going to go with 12 because it's dark enough, but it's not pure black. So it's not completely absorbing light. It's just dark enough where it looks black, but not completely black. Sorry, that was saturation. I wanted value of 12. So we'll apply that. And then similarly, we'll just click on our ID mask here. And if you go 8, we want to apply this to all the blue parts. So we'll just get rid of the red and we'll get the bright blue. So now you can see we're starting to mask things out. We'll go Control D again, and we can call this one like silver, or maybe steel would be better. And so we'll change this. I've got a hex value to use for like a more steel-like color, so we're going to go 9DA0A0. So I think this is more like a bluey tinge sort of white, which is a little bit closer to steel, I believe. And once again, we'll just assign that to the yellow part of our ID. So now we've got that. And then the last thing we want to do is we'll just go Control D again. We can call this one our visor. But this one we're not actually going to assign the ID mask to the texture slot, or the layer, sorry. So I'm just going to delete the ID mask. I'm going to create a new group, drag it up and outside of our colors. We'll call this one visor. And then we'll drag the visor layer inside of that group or folder. And we'll right click on the group. Add an ID mask, and then we want to use the bright green by memory for the visor. And then we want to change the visor a little bit because we want this to be completely metallic, so we'll have the value at 100. And we want the visor to be a little bit more reflective than everything else, so we'll go to our roughness here and we'll change the value to 20, just so it's a little bit more reflective. And we can just give it a nice placeholder color, so something that looks like a nice gold sort of visor. Something like that. So let's add a little bit more interest here. So let's go and with the visor layer selected, let's add a new solid layer, and we'll call this one visor color variation, my bad. Visor color variation. And then if you press 9 on your keyboard, we can see the layer mask for a layer. At the moment it's just white, so let's change that. Let's right click on the visor layer color variation, and we'll add a mask stack. Now what we can do is we can get a mask component. Let's get a texture map, use a library asset, and then we can browse the library. And so what I want you to search for is wipe marks. And unfortunately Quixel has really terrible naming conventions because these are all white marks, right? They are indistinguishable name-wise. I know I'm looking for this one here, and I'll do my best to tell you which textures I'm using, but it's not the end of the world. If you use something different to me, you can just adjust the values as you need to on your end and have a more unique looking set of textures. So first thing I want to do here is I just want to change this from gloss to roughness. And if you're not familiar, gloss and roughness are just the inverse of one another. And then this range here, because I just really want to isolate the white parts, we can use the range part here to just clamp the colors in. So I'm just going to bring this up to around 0.27. And then it's isolated the white parts, but I just want them to be a little bit brighter. So I can just grab this other handle and bring this down to 0.7, just somewhere around there. But I don't really like the way that this is projecting onto the visor because it's all grouped up on the side here. And then, there's just a little bit around here. So to give us a little bit more control, what we can do is we can add a modifier and get a projection. And this isn't too important right now, but we're going to use it a lot later on. If you hold down Alt and then hover up near the header of a layer, you get this little arrow. And if you left click, what it does is that it means that this here will only affect this bottom layer and nothing else below that. So let's just go ahead and change this from tiling to box projection. I'm just going to click and drag this circle, our tilt, and just bring it into 0. I'm going to change our height influence to 0. It's just not a feature I particularly enjoy using. And then I'm going to change the scale to 0.5. Now, I've changed it to 0.5, and the effect I want that to have is to actually scale the texture up. We did not scale this helmet to a proper size, and if we come to our setup panel here, you can see that the helmet is 3 meters by 4 by 4, so this is huge. What we can do on an account of that is we can just change the scale factor here. So if we change it to 0.08 and just hit enter, then we get a scaling factor that's more accurate to what you'd expect. And so now if you look at this, it's sort of projecting onto the visor in a much nicer way. But I'm still not stoked with the way it looks. It just kind of looks like we've pasted an image on top of the visor. So let's add a little bit more intrigue with what's going on with the actual material properties themselves. So what we can do is let's get the albedo and we'll set that to pure white, and we'll change the blending type from normal to subtract. The metalness can stay at complete black. So for those not familiar, metalness when it is black is a dielectric material, so anything that's not metal, and when metalness is white, it's a metallic material. Then for the roughness, what we're going to want to use is we're going to want to have it set to white. So we'll just drag this that way up. And roughness is the inverse of metalness pretty much. So if roughness is set to completely white, then it is not a glossy surface. If it's set to completely black, then it is completely reflective like a mirror. And we'll just change this blending type from normal to add. And it starts to give us a little bit more visual intrigue on what we're seeing here. And then, so if I press 2, I can see the albedo channel. 3, I can see the metalness channel, so you can see where the metal is and where the dielectric parts are. And then 4 gives us that roughness, so we can see all of our various channels. And so we can just continue to build this out and add some more interest. So let's add another solid layer, and we'll call this one Visor Roughness. And this one we're not actually going to affect the metalness channel at all, so we can just toggle that off. We can right click, we can add a mask stack, and let's go ahead and bring in a texture map, change it to a library asset, and you can see that I was already mucking around with this earlier, but pretty much the filtering within Quixel is terrible, because right now what we want to get is a scratched painted metal, And you'd think we search for this, we'd get scratched painted metal. No, we don't. And we could use the imperfections and metal filtering, hit enter, and it's still terrible. It does not serve us what we want. So instead, what I'm going to suggest we do is keep the imperfections and metal, and we're just going to search for paint instead. And then conveniently, it does put the one that I want straight away here. It might not for you, because I don't know how Quixel is going to filter things, but we want one that looks like this. If you don't find exactly this one, it's alright. I'll teach you a workaround for it, because we just need a general sort of look. So if you did find this one, it should look like this when you load it in. We just want to change from gloss to mask, and then we'll get something like this. So provided you can make something that has a completely white background with the scratches in black, then you're all good. If it's not exactly this one, it's all good. You just need this general sort of look and feel to it. So I'm just going to clamp this down to around 0.4 or something. So just that, just clear up some of the smaller ones, make it all a bit sharper. Let's bring in a projection modifier, and we'll alt and click on the header because we are going to have several textures and projections within this one. And we'll change it to box projection. We'll leave the tilt at 90, bring the radius up to 1, the height influence down to 0, and we'll set our scale to 0.5 once again. And we could adjust that later on, but it just sort of puts some scratches quite nicely onto the visor there. And at the moment, it's not really doing what I want. Like, it's just isolating onto directly, the visor color directly onto these parts. So if we want to actually see what is going on here, we can start to adjust the shader values here. So with the albedo, let's make it completely black. We'll apply that. And we'll change from normal to multiply. And we'll bring the opacity down to 0.3. And then for the roughness here, we're going to change this value from 90 to 10, so it's going to be a lot more reflective. And so you can see that coming through now, and we're sort of just getting those little scratch details pull through for us. And then we just need to leave the roughness at normal. Yep. Cool. So yeah, now we can actually see what's going on with our masking there. So continuing this along, we'll just get another texture map. We'll use a library asset. And for this one, we're looking for a grungy surface. So I'm just going to untick metal, I think. Let's go grungy surface. We might just do grungy. Yeah, let's just do that. And then I know the one we want here, because see how none of the other ones have these little circular splotches. So I know this is the one that I want because it's got a more unique look to it. So I'll just press 9 so we can see our mask. I'm going to change this from gloss to roughness, and then I'm going to clamp the range in a bit, so I'm going to bring this up close to 0.4, so around there, and I'm just going to leave this one at 1. But at the moment you can see that this is just completely overwriting our previous layer, so we can't see this scratch anymore, and that's because we have blending modes within inside the masks here. So for this one, I'm just going to change this to difference, and now you can see that we're also getting that scratch detail pulling through as well. And then just so we can customize everything again, we'll get a projection map. Make sure you alt-click the header so it's only affecting this one, because if we don't and go box projection, we'll also mess up the scratching at the bottom here, so just make sure you alt-click that. And for this one, let's go with a tilt of 90, an angle of -90. And a handy thing here is you hold down shift, it will snap to 15-degree increments. So I'm just going to go with an angle of -90 there. We'll change our tilt to around 30, just so it's like sort of streaking more diagonally across our visor here. Once again, we'll bring the radius up to 1 and the height influence down to 0. That's going to be pretty stock standard for us to do on just about all of these. And let's bring the scale down to around 0.2, so somewhere around there. So now we're just getting some more of those streaks and grunge across everything. Which is looking quite nice, just getting a little bit more variance in our visor at the front. And let's just get one more, so we'll go texture map, library asset, and we're looking for scratched metal, so we'll go imperfection, metal, and we'll go scratch. And this one, we kind of want something that's got fairly low contrast, which I know to be this one. This one's got a fairly distinctive look to it, so we'll just bring this in. And once again, at the moment, this is going to be completely overriding absolutely everything. So let's just change the blending mode to multiply, just so we can bring that in with the rest of the detail here. And we'll just clamp in our top end range. So we'll just bring this down to around 0.5. Somewhere around there, it looks nice. And as you come to expect, we'll get a projection. We'll alt-click that down, box project. We'll keep our tilt at 90, radius up to 1, height influence at 0, and then we can just bring our scale down to something low. Going 0.2 for this one, and there. Also, if you alt-click on the little eye, then it will isolate, it will hide everything else, and it will just isolate that one. As soon as you click on something else though, the alt-click won't restore everything. Just so you know what's going on there. I think this was supposed to be a smaller scale. So let's bring that down even more, just so we've got more of those white marks sort of going across the visor. Make it look a little bit more unique. Oops. Cool, and there we go. So now we've got a lot more variation going on, and it's not just so nice and clean, and it's a little bit more reflective now as well, which is nice. And so the next layer we're going to build is a little bit more interesting. So we'll just add in another solid layer here, and just make sure it's above the Visor Rough, and we'll call this one Visor White. And this one's going to be a little bit more interesting because we're actually going to add some normal detail into it with the height and wrap to underlying blending. But anyway, let's go ahead. We'll add a mask stack. We'll bring in a texture map, library asset, and we'll search for scratched. We want a scratched painted metal, and we're looking for, I think it might be this one here. Let's just have a look. I'll go to the mask and I'll be able to tell you. And so once we've brought this in, we'll just leave it at gloss, and we'll change our range to be just around 0.2. So just bring that up. And then I'm also going to clamp down the upper end. So I'm guessing the white handle of it, the 7.14 there. And so we'll bring in a projection. You'll notice that this is a very routine thing that we sort of do for all these setups. And we're just going to change the tiling from X and Y to be 1 and 1 to 1 and 2, just to sort of stretch everything out along the Y-axis just a little bit more there. And then the next thing we'll do, just to make this a little bit easier, we're just going to use Control-D with our texture map selected, so that duplicates things. I'm just going to grab it and drag it above the texture projection. We're going to set this blending type to maximum here, so we can also bring through those white highlights, just so we get 2 instances effectively of these scratches, just at different instances, I suppose. And so I'm just going to drag this up to 0.34-ish, and I'll bring this one down to 0.6. Just so we've got a little bit of variation between how much of the scratching they're pulling through. And we'll also get a projection, alt-click to just put it down onto this one, because just remember, if we don't have it on the alt-click, it will affect everything. We'll set this one to box projection, and we'll give it a tilt, we'll give it a tilt of 16, just to make it a little bit more random, or thereabouts. 15 will be fine. Just so it's on a different angle, it's not as identifiable anymore. I think we can leave the angle at 0, we'll give it a radius of 1, height influence of 0, and we can adjust the scale, just make it really, really small, just to give a little bit more variation. So now we've got some nice big scratches along the visor, and we've got some smaller ones, and don't worry, this looks a little bit intense at the moment, but we're going to adjust all of these settings here at the end. I just wanted to build out the mask first, so you can see what's happening. Let's go ahead and we'll pull in a brightness and contrast. Actually, before we do that, we might actually adjust these values, and then I think the brightness and contrast and all that stuff will make a little bit more sense. So with the albedo here, let's go ahead and we'll change its value to 73. So just a nice sort of bright white, but not completely white. And we'll change the blend type to add, and we'll bring the opacity way, way down to 0.1, just because you can see this is fairly intense, so we want to make it a little bit more subtle if we can. And then we're going to have the metalness remain as black, because if we look at our metalness map, we're getting some nice dielectric contrast here between the metal and dielectric parts of the visor. And we're going to make the roughness completely black, just so it's a little bit more reflective. Is that shining through? Yep, that's being reflected. Cool, so now we've got some shinier parts on the visor. I just don't know why the preview material is still looking at white, but it's definitely reflecting there. Cool. But this is still a little bit too intense, so we'll bring in the brightness and contrast, change things, and then we'll cull a lot of it out with a grunge map, just to give some more variance so it's not so uniformly displayed across everything. So let's get a modifier, we'll get the brightness and contrast. Now we'll leave the brightness at 0, and we'll just bring the contrast up to around 2.2. 2.2, well, it's not quite there, but yeah, there we go. So it just sort of limits bits and pieces of it out, just so it takes away a few more of our scratches. And then let's go ahead and we'll grab another texture map. We'll get a library asset. And I don't think we want metal, we just want to search for grunge. And I don't have any particular grunge map in mind. I just want something with a decent amount of contrast. Maybe this one. I don't think the grunge maps are going to be too important, because these are effectively just working as a means of like cutting away where the scratches appear. So we can start to visualize that if we change this from normal to multiply. As we toggle between, you can sort of see it's cutting out how bright some of these values are. But we can make it a little bit more intense, and once again, this may not be the correct grunge map, but let's just see. So I just alt-clicked on this to isolate it. So I'm just going to bring this up to like 0.7 and clamp this into around 0.8. So I don't think this is the right grunge map because, oh, actually, unless, yeah. So I need something that's got a mask. Grungy surface, grunge, grungy surface, grunge. Let's try this one. Ah, cool, this has got a mask. This might be the one I want. That's, oh, if we invert it. Nah, because I don't think that's going to cut away at enough of the scratch. Oh, no, that cuts away way too much of the scratches. Okay, let's not be as pedantic as I would normally. So I'm just going to use, this is just some random grunge map with a mask. It probably doesn't even need to be set to mask. It could be roughness or gloss, and it's probably still going to get the same effect. But pretty much all it's doing is it's just trying to cut away how consistently the scratching is appearing across the surface of the visor. So I'm going to drag these handles around. Might even look at material view instead when it's rendered, just to get a better read on the way I like this to look. So yeah, I think somewhere around there. It's definitely not the same one I've used before, but you're still getting these nice little white scratches appearing along the visor. So that's really the main thing. So the next thing we want to do is we want to add some normal depth to this. So if we press, what was that, 5 on the keyboard, we can see the normals that we baked out nicely in the previous tutorial. But we can actually affect these. We can add some detail to them. So if we just click back over on the circle here, what we want to do is let's set our height to negative 0.5. So we're going to put indents into everything. And then we want our wrap to underlying. I don't fully understand what this does, but I know we need to change it for it to come through. If we change it to 0.95, now you can see we've got those scratches appearing on our normal detail, which is quite nice. So when we actually look past it, you know, we're actually getting a little bit of bump mapping in there, and it looks like we've got some proper damage occurring on the visor there. And so then we'll just go ahead and add in another solid. We'll call this one Visor Black, just so we can add like some blacky, oily sort of smudges onto the visor. So we'll just right click, add a mask stack, and same old, let's go ahead and get a library asset. And so this one, we're looking for a scratched metal, I believe, or scratched painted metal. So we'll search for paint with our imperfections and metal. I may have already screwed this up trying to find it, so that's why I've already got paint there. And then I know it's this one here, just because I've done this a million times now. I think we've already used this one before, so it's that sort of like mid. Oh, actually, no, that's the one we used before, I think. So it's like a little bit lower contrast than the other one, smaller details. And so we're going to have this remained at gloss. We're just going to bring the range up to 2.6-ish, around there, and we'll drop this down to around 0.7. I think this is the same setup as what we did in the other one, right? So we get something that looks like this. And then we'll just adjust it a little bit more. So we'll bring in a brightness and contrast. We'll bring the brightness up to around 0.2, just so we can make the white parts a lot brighter, and then we'll make the contrast like 2.2, which I'm pretty sure we did earlier as well. So just really bring out those nice white scratches. And I know we don't need to, but just to get into the habit of doing it, I'm just going to alt-click this down so it's only affecting this one here. And then to round out our detailing for the visor, we'll just get one more texture map, library asset, and this one we're going to use as grunge. And our grunge maps aren't as important, just because the detail's not as sophisticated, I suppose you could say. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it. But this one we're going to be adding into the rest of the visor, so it's actually going to influence a little bit more of the detail. And so in doing that, we want to clamp in the white and black values here, just so we're having like less of the grunge sort of showing through. So we'll clamp this in and clamp this into around 0.7. Somewhere around there. So I'm going to say this is too much. So I don't like this grunge map because I kind of want something that's a little bit more subdued than this. So I'm just going to have a look for some other grunge maps. See if I can find something that I like. Actually, it'd probably be easier to show you what I'm going for if we actually adjust the material settings. So let's do that. So our albedo, we want this to be at a value of 25. So this is going to be darker, obviously given the name it's Visor Black, right? And we're also going to bring down our opacity. So we'll bring that down to 0.2. For our metalness, we're just going to turn that off again for this one. I think we've done enough affecting of the dielectric and metallic parts. The roughness, on the other hand, we're going to have at 67. So it'll be, you know, just halfway between. It's more on the rougher side of the roughness materials. And we'll set the blending type to multiply, just so it sort of blends in a little bit more with everything else. And then we've got a better idea of how we want to adjust this mask, and sort of we can better see how it's playing in with everything else, which at the moment I don't really see it doing an awful lot, which, you know, because of the opacity. But I want to see if I can find something that I can see a little bit better with that opacity level of 0.2. So let's just have a look around. What grunges do we have? This one's got pretty high contrast. That kind of gets the effect that I want. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So, like, I could probably get something a little bit more intense, and I could bring the opacity up for this one, I suppose. I think it just stands out a bit too much if I go too high. But, like, you can see, like, you got little scratches here and just through the front, so if I toggle it off and then back on, you can sort of see the effect that it's having. So I'm just going to go with that, because I think that sort of completes the look. It's relatively similar to what I had before. You might have something different, but that's the great thing about texturing, right? We get unique results from this. It's not going to be a one-to-one of mine. It's going to be your helmet and textures. But yeah, that one rounds out the visor. So now we can go on to adding detail and a lot more variance into the other parts of the helmet. So let's go ahead and make a new group or a new folder. We'll call this one Variance. And we'll just go ahead, add a solid layer, make sure it's inside the Variance folder. And we can just call this one our Variance Base. Because this is the first one that we plaster on over the top of all of the established colours below it, just to break up the colours and everything. So we're not going to affect any of the metalness on this one, so we can just turn that off. For our albedo, we'll make it a value of 15. And we'll change the blending type here to subtract. And then for our roughness, we're going to change this to a value of 10. So this is going to be a fairly reflective layer that we're going to be working with here. And then we'll change this to add. So that's not doing a whole lot at the moment because it's just applying uniformly across, but we'll go ahead and we'll set up our mask stack. And this one's a very simple one. All of these masks that we're about to make are very simple. So we'll just get a library asset and we're searching for grunge. And we want something with decently high contrast. So what looks good? I think maybe, let's have a look at this. So that looks alright. Let's change it to roughness. And then, ooh, yeah, I think this one might work quite well because we sort of want to clamp this up to 0.2, thereabouts. I think that looks pretty nice in all honesty. This is the look I'm going for, so even if you haven't got the same grunge as me, I'm kind of just going for like this splattered bits of white all over the place. Because then, you know, even if you just look at the material at the moment, you can see we're getting those darker areas on the helmet. So that's what we're going for. And then very simply, let's just go ahead and get a projection. I'm just going to alt-click, just good practice. I'm just going to repeat this twice just to make everything a bit smaller. And I think that's just about... Actually, we'll just rotate it 90 degrees as well, just give it a bit of a different angle. I think this might have been exactly... Yeah, it is. I've got a set of reference images I can look at to try to match my work up, and this is spot on, which I didn't actually practice that one. That was a complete fluke. Flim? Jeez. Good thing I'm teaching texturing and not English. Alright, let's go ahead and let's go make another mask. And we can call this one Variance Dark. Variance Dark. And so pretty much same thing here. So we'll go ahead and we'll change the albedo to be 35. So I'm just getting some more variance in there. And we'll set this one to overlay. Where is it? At the bottom there. This one we will have metalness on it, but we'll have it set to black. So we'll have this one take away from the metal aspects that we've already got. So at the moment, it's gone back to being a completely dielectric material. We'll change the roughness to 28. So once again, this will be a fairly reflective part of everything. And we'll set this to add. So actually where it overlaps with things, it will probably make everything a little bit more less reflective if we're adding things on. So let's go ahead and add in our mask stack. And we'll just start this one out very simply with a texture map, browse, and we're going to look for just scratched metal. So let's scratch. Scratched? Yeah. So I don't know what we're going to use. I'm just going to try. I think this one looks pretty nice because it's got like pretty decent contrast between everything. I know we've used this before for something else, but I think it looks pretty good. And then we're going to chuck a gradient remap on top of this. So we're going to grab this. We'll leave the repeat at 1, and then we'll just bring this range in to 0.6. Somewhere around there. Just so we're sort of getting a little bit more higher contrast. I may change this just because I'm not sure about this front part here. But, I mean, we are about to chuck a box projection on, so... just wait and see. And also I'm just going to alt-click this. Once again, just good force of habit to get into. So we'll get a projection, and we'll set this to box projection. We'll leave our tilt at 90, radius up to 1, height influence all the way down to 0. And we'll bring the scale down to around 0.6. So somewhere around there. Yeah, and that nicely cleans up that blotch that was at the front there. Sort of scatters around here and there, and we're not really going to see much effect of that just yet because it's fairly low contrast. But it's alright because we're going to build some more on top of this. We've just got one more thing to do. We're just going to add a noise texture on top of it. So we'll go noise and we'll choose simplex for this one. And we're going to set this to overlay. Just so that we're still sort of just injecting some more variation into the texture that we've already added. And so let's go with a seed of 71, an amplitude of 0.6. And yes, you're all aware that I'm reading off of a chart because I cannot remember all of this. Let's go with a frequency of 10.93. It seems like just a great one right off the top of my head. We'll go with 8 octaves. The lacunarity, that's it, lacunarity. I was practicing how to pronounce that before I did this tutorial because I could not pronounce it for the life of me the last time I did one. So the lacunarity, it's such a weird word, it does not roll off the tongue. Anyway, close to 2, and then a persistence value of around 0.7. So yeah, it's just sort of broken everything up. It's added some more contrast into what we're seeing. And I don't know if we can really see too much of the effect that that's making. You can a little bit. Once we start to layer in more of it, you'll be able to see that shine through a little bit more with the roughness. But if we look at our metalness and roughness maps, we're starting to get some nice contrast between the colors. It's still fairly low contrast, but this will really shine through as we pack on the next 2 layers. Alright, so let's add in another layer here. And so then we'll go Roughness Variance. We're just going to turn our albedo off for this one, so we're not going to affect any of the color. And we'll also turn the metalness off, so we'll just use the roughness for this one. This one will be a higher roughness value, so we'll use a roughness of 94, so this will tend closer to white. We'll add this on to the other parts of our roughness channel, and we'll bring the opacity down to 0.75 just so it blends a little bit better and it's not as overpowering. Cool, let's go ahead, we'll add in a mask stack, get a texture map, library asset, and this one we want to use some grunge, and we're kind of want to get something similar to that first one where we're just limiting it all to just the white highlights of a grunge map. So I don't know if this is going to work, but let's give it a test. So we'll leave that at gloss. We'll bring this up to 0.5, somewhere around there. That's looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and get a projection map. I'll click that down. We'll go box projection. Let's go with an angle of -30, just to make it less uniform like everything else that's been sitting at 90-degree increments. We'll do radius of 1, height influence down at 0, and we'll bring our scale down to around 0.4. So I don't think that's too bad. I think that's actually, once again, I think that might have been the one that I've actually used on my reference. I think I might just bring the range up a little bit higher. Just make it, yeah, a little bit more contrasty. I think that looks better. Cool. I think that looks pretty good. And I just want to toggle between just so we can sort of see what's happening. So you can't see too much at the moment. You can probably see that taking more of an effect on the darker parts of the model. It doesn't really shine through. Oh, of course it's not going to shine through on the albedo because we turned it off. But yeah, there you go. So you can see we're adding that nice white contrast in the roughness. So once again, it's kind of hard to see at the moment. I might even just change this blue to, I think when I was texturing it, I was using a red. I just wanted to change it from that red at the start to not confuse people with the fact that we were using a red emission channel as well as like a red color mask. Sorry, a red albedo channel. So let's see, can I get something nice and sort of desaturated? Yeah, I think that's nice desaturated red like this. It's a lot easier to see. So yeah, there you go. Now you can really see, if we just turn these three off, you can really see the difference of this, you know, build just a little bit on top. It doesn't really give too much. A little bit more, you start to break everything up. You get some of those black bits and highlights and everything. And now we're really starting to get some nice variation across the surface. So we've just got one more thing to add, and then we'll round out this tutorial, and then we'll finish everything off in the next tutorial with our edgeware and our dirt. So the last one we'll do is we'll just add another solid layer. This one will just be roughness. And for this one, we are going to have our albedo set to 15. So this is going to be a fairly dark aspect of our masking. This one we will have metalness, and this will be black, so this will be taking away from the metal parts and making things more dielectric. And we'll also set our roughness to black, so we'll add some more shine onto the model. Let's go ahead, we'll add our mask stack. And let's go ahead, we'll bring in a scratched metal. So texture map, library asset. I'll go for scratched. And I'm not going to search for metal because that seems to screw it up. And I don't know exactly what I'm looking for here. I don't think I want to use this one again. I kind of feel like we want to go for something else. Let's try this. So I'm just going to go 9 on my keyboard to see this. Cool. I've got no idea how this is going to work. I know that the mask needs to be predominantly black with the white highlights, and I have this set to gloss in my reference. Okay, so I think it's this scratched metal that we've been using quite frequently, so that works quite nicely for us. And I've accidentally loaded that in as a new layer somehow. I don't know how I've managed that. So we'll pick this one here. And then I'm just going to clamp our range up to around 0.4. Yeah, that's the right one, because we just want sort of small pockets of everything around it. And then we'll just add a new texture map. So we're not going to do any projection mapping on that one there. We'll get another library asset, and this one's a dirty metal. I think there's only one of these, so that makes it nice and easy for us. So we'll grab that, we'll change this to mask, and then we'll set the blend type to add, and we'll just drag this range down to 0.6. So just something like that. So yeah, you can see we're getting some nice sort of smattering on everything, where we've got like these nice highlights that are appearing dark. So it's like, I don't know, it's like maybe some oil staining or something, kind of like what we were trying to achieve on the visor. And then, you know, it's all a bit uniform. Like, even though it's scattered, it's technically uniform. So what we'll do is we'll add one more map. Oh no, sorry, we won't add one more map. What we'll do, sorry, to make it less uniform in a capacity, is we'll use a box projection. So we'll just apply this to both of them. We'll go radius of 1, height influence of 0, and we'll bring the scale down to 0.5. Yeah. So yeah, still technically applied uniformly, but I think it's scattered enough. Sorry, I thought we were going to multiply something into it. We technically could, but I think this looks quite nice. So there we go. By the end of the first part of the texturing, we've got a quite nicely built up set of layers here. So we've got a nicely detailed visor, and we've got some nice variation scattered across our helmet here. And so just for a quick comparison, let's take our variation off, or our variance, and all the grunge and build up on the helmet visor there. So I've got something that's looking really nice. And we're not yet done adding the edge wear, and the dirt really brings this thing to life. So get excited for the next tutorial, because that's when it really comes together and looks like a proper helmet. So I'll see you guys all in that one.